Welcome to the Writer's Game Podcast, where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. And now, let's get into the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Writer's Game Podcast, where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. I'm here with somebody really, really special. Somebody here that is getting ready to shake up the educational industry, and not just the educational industry, the world. Juaneka, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am absolutely fantastic. So before we get started, can you just introduce yourself and tell us how you're using your story to transform lives around the world?
Sure. So my name is Juaneka Brim, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I am an entrepreneur who helps other entrepreneurs to use their talents and gifts to monetize them and have the sort of career and the life that they deserve.
How would you define talent and gift?
There are a lot of different ways to define that, but I define talent as something that you are sort of naturally good at. It doesn't take much thought, much effort. You're naturally adept at it. Now, it's different from a passion or an interest. You can be talented at something that you may not feel so passionately about. So that's a distinction there. But I like to help people bridge what they're good at and what they are really interested in and find a way to monetize that.
What would you say that your talents or gifts are?
Well, I think that I am really good at listening to people and helping them to hone in and reflect on what it is they really want to do, bringing that out of people. I also think that I'm really good at teaching people how to do things in a succinct and clear way. I feel like I'm able to break things down in a very manageable dosage, if you will, when they're trying to figure out how to do something or accomplish a goal.
How did you realize, I guess, that was your talent, or these are things that you're gifted at? Like, can you tell me a little bit about an experience that opened up like, wow, I'm actually good at this?
So I guess I would have to go back to when I was a kid. I was raised by my grandparents. My parents were in my life, but for most of my life, I was raised by my grandparents. And I used to go to church with my grandmother, and it was a very small church. And when I say it was small, there was a woman who was the superintendent of our Sunday school, okay? And if she had to be absent, my grandmother would make me take her place.
Oh, wow.
At a very young age. And I don't know why she did that. I don't know if she saw something in me, but she used to make me do it. Mind you, like I said, I was raised by my grandparents, and I have an aunt who's 2 years older than I am, who's my grandmother's daughter, who lived in the house with me, but she would never put her up to these things, but she would always make me do it. So I had to basically facilitate the entire church service in the absence of the superintendent. And I can tell you, I was probably like maybe as young as 12 starting this out. And it continued. She would also make me teach Sunday school classes to kids who were older than me. So I was kind of nudged into, training or teaching people at a young age, but I never wanted to be a teacher, ironically.
Interesting. I think
I did not.
It's so interesting that that's how it started, and you kind of ended up back into your gift in a sense. So I guess, could you walk me through, like, that was your childhood. What was, I guess, the middle part? What was the major story in the middle before you became an expert educator?
So I would say throughout school, throughout junior high and high school, I developed an interest somehow. I don't know if it was through osmosis, to be able to look out leadership opportunities, whether it was a club and becoming an officer, student council really was something that I was quite fond of. And so it just went on from there. Every opportunity that I had to be in a club and to be a leader, I wanted to take that opportunity. I like to do things like debate as well. And so when I was a senior, there was this, I wanted to be a child psychologist. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with children and hear their stories and just kind of help them in life. And so when I was a senior, there was this trip to go on, to go to a conference, and it was in the city, and I wanted to go. So that's why I went. But it was for future educators in the state. And so I went, and it was right before graduation and then me going into college. And then I ended up majoring in English and going to college. I went through the education program and wanted to be a college professor. And my advisor said it's going to be hard to find a job right out of college as a professor. You should get certified to teach K-12, which again, I never wanted to do that, but I did. And I went that path, and I got my master's degree. During my first year of teaching, I started working on it and got that in 2 years. And I got it in administration, and I taught for 3 years and became a program coordinator for Title I, and then I became a principal. And so throughout that time, though, I did sort of take a break from education. I worked in the corporate world, I did training, I did sales for other companies. And I'm really glad that I did that because it gave me a breadth of experience when it comes to work. And it just let me see that there's so many things that you can do. And it's not a good idea to pigeonhole yourself. You know, when you go to college and you get a degree, particularly if you get a master's degree or a PhD, people will think that that's all that you can do. And I had to fight against that when I tried to leave education and just get other jobs. There were people who looked at my resume and my experience, and they just made an assumption based on what they saw my education was. Well, this is what you can do. And so I never believed that. I didn't believe that. So I tried things over the years, and you know, back then things weren't like they are now. Like if you want to learn about something, the whole world is at your fingertips. If you want a mentor, you can go seek one out, but things weren't that way then. And so, you know, I feel like there were a lot of things that I could have done a long time ago had I just been persistent and gotten the right type of education. Because, you know, unfortunately, so many of us fall victim to what I call the programming. And some people say that you have to unlearn and relearn. I like to say unlearn and newly learn, because you don't want to relearn the bad things that you already knew. You have to learn something new. So that's what I came to do. I feel like a lot of things were always under the surface when it came to my philosophy of education. Even when I was a teacher, I never just liked the traditional mold. And so I would try things with my students all the time. They probably thought I was crazy, but I remember having a whistle, and I taught English. What am I doing with the whistle? And I would have my students do things to help them get out of their seats and do project-based learning. And, you know, I could recognize, even though nobody explicitly told me, I had an appreciation for learning styles, different different ways that people learn. And so when I would have students who would struggle, a lot of times, because I taught secondary, I realized that, okay, let's say I have a student who's a C student or they make Ds. They are coming to me feeling defeated. Like, this is all I ever get. So this is all I'm going to try. Like, why work hard if this is all that's going to happen? And so one thing that I would take it up on myself to do with my students is, if I knew a student didn't do well on written tests, I would put like a desk near my desk for them, and I would have them test orally to see if I could get more information, just a better picture of how they learned, and it worked. And so it just taught me that there's more than one way of learning. I do want to share this story. My first year as a teacher, I taught 8th and 9th grade English. And for some reason, the administration did not say anything about this, but I had a class that was literally 50% special ed students and 50% straight A students.
Wow. What did that
They
teach you?
said nothing.
What was that experience like?
It was interesting, and being a first year teacher was all I knew. So I wasn't really like complaining about it. I saw it as a challenge. Well, how can I help these kids?
Exactly.
And so they did give me a special ed co-teacher. She had a little more experience teaching, but she never wanted to share the teaching role. And I'm like, okay, so I want them to be used to both of us. I don't want them to feel self-conscious or whatever. So I just dug in and I really got to know them. And it really taught me about a lot about learning styles. And it was a very good experience. It served me very well to this day. What I learned to do when it comes to teaching people, like I said, being able to take things and break it down for you no matter where you are, I feel like that's something that I'm really good at. And it actually has come full circle with the type of people that I like to help today.
I think that was so, there's so much value packed in everything that you just said. I think one of the biggest things, the first point that I want to ask you about is this concept of unlearning and new learning. And that's the first time that I've heard that, because I think oftentimes we do hear just unlearn and then relearn. But when you're relearning, you're technically learning the things that you just unlearned. So
Right.
what is one thing in your life, not as an educator, but as a person, that you've had to unlearn? And what is the new thing that you had to implement?
So, one thing in my life that I would say that I learned is that we all have to take responsibility for what we want in life. There's no one who is going to sit you down in a class and teach you how to get it right in life. You have to be comfortable with no safety net. And one thing that I've learned in life that I wish I had learned sooner is that failing can be your best teacher. Because when you try something and you fail at it, you know, if you're a positive and a positive type of person and someone with ambition, you're gonna try again. You're not gonna give up after one try. At least I won't. But I bet you I won't do that same thing that I did before. And I'll get a little better and I'll try something else. And I'll get a little better and a little better until I finally reach my goal. And so with that being said, I feel like a lot of the things that I've newly learned have been that I've had to learn how to trust my own judgment. Even if it's a mistake, just own it and keep going until I accomplish that goal. And so like one of those things has to do with entrepreneurship. So you have to carve that path out for yourself. Even if you have a trainer or a coach, one thing that people need to realize, and I realize this myself, so I'm not saying anything for anyone to hear that I wouldn't take the advice from as well. When you hire a coach or a mentor, whatever you want to call them, there are differences, but they're slight. You need to incorporate yourself into that equation as your own teacher. They can put the information, the knowledge, the wisdom in front of you. You still have to process your situation, your goals, and work towards making them happen because their situation is not your situation. You have to overcome your own obstacles and get to where it is that you want to go. And you have to be okay with struggling, even when you have a coach. Because again, you just, the only way you're not going to get there, there are two reasons, I think. I mean, there could be a number, but two main reasons is if you never ever get started and if you stop before you reach that goal. So
Can you talk to that person though? Because I think this concept of I failed at something or I made a mistake and I'm just going to keep trying and trying. And eventually I believe you'll get better, just like you believe. But there's people that have an opposite perspective where I've been trying this over and over. And their perspective, instead of I'm going to just keep going, is I've been trying it. I need to stop. Could you talk to that person? What would you say to that person that has stopped, that wants to stop, that was just right there at the pinnacle of shifting and changing in their life? What would you say to that person?
So I would say to that person, and this is coming from a biblical perspective for me. There's scripture in the Bible about this, and I wish that I had my notes in front of me. I would give you the exact scripture. I think it comes from, it's either in Matthew or Luke, but Jesus talks about this, about when you get a no, you still have to keep going. You still have to keep going because all of that pressure and frustration is not for nothing. Like it might take you, Kyle, a lot less time to accomplish your goal than me, just because of lessons that you need to learn along the way. Everything doesn't happen for everybody in the same amount of time. And you just have to keep going and be persistent. Like you may have to fail 3 times before you get that first goal accomplished, because there were 3 lessons that you needed to take. So that as you continue going, you got that piece with you, and then you'll be that much better the next time that you get started. Exactly. But somebody else, they might get it the first time. Yeah. And that's okay. And you can't get caught up in comparing yourself to other people, because their journey is theirs and yours is yours. But if you just keep going, you're gonna get there. We all have to start somewhere, and persistence is something that there's just no shortcut around it. You have to go through it sometimes, and you just can't give up.
What's something that, and I know you talked about the story earlier, in regards to when you were co-teaching with the special education teacher and the 50-50 split with straight A students and then also special needs students. And it allowed you to really dig in, and it ended up creating an amazing experience for you to be able to learn. But what's something that shaped you to be who you are today personally, in regards to a story or an experience that kicked you on your behind, that you had to that you had to rebuild from? What's that story?
So, so many. I'm thinking of a story. So when I was a principal in Southern California, and I had just had my first child. And as an educator, I love kids, almost to the point where I put them first over the teachers. I'm not gonna lie. And right, wrong, or indifferent, for me, I used to say, I can sleep at night as long as I know that I made decisions that were best for kids. And so after I had my first child, my husband and I didn't have family around, and I didn't feel the same when I went back to work. I found my mind with my child at home with a nanny, a live-in nanny. We had all the trappings, and I wasn't happy. And I said, how can I be there for everybody else's kid and not my own? And so I resigned as a principal to stay home with my daughter. Wow. And I felt like when the time came, God would open up doors for me to do something to make money. And so right out of the gate, I started a business. It was a network marketing business at the time. And I went through the process. I made the investment. Where it all went wrong for me is I think I was so in my head about it being something new, that safety net was going. Because when you go to college and you're taught to go to a 9 to 5, like that's predictable. The work is predictable, the income is predictable. This was totally unpredictable, and I knew nothing about it. And it didn't work out the way that I thought that it would. And on top of that, going from a 6-figure salary to nothing, and my husband having the only salary, we had this big house and all this stuff, I was filled with anxiety, and it failed. And no wonder, right? I just wasn't in the right place mentally. And I was so caught up in the fact that I had wasted money and resources. My family needed that money to pay for something else. And here I am trying to start a business. And it failed, and I folded, and I gave up for a long time.
How did you bounce back?
Through stories and mindset. Like just through hearing other people's story and seeing that people like me had done it, people who had less than me had done it. And so I just came back with a vengeance, just trying new ventures and not giving up. And, I've had success here and there along the way, but what the things that I'm working on now are the biggest that I've ever worked on. And, it's a lot of work, but I would not trade this mindset and this trajectory for anything. I just wish that I had gotten here sooner. Some of this stuff sounds cliche, but it is true. You have to be successful in your mind first before you have whatever success, monetary or whatever it is. It's like for me, before when I was a teacher and I wanted to be a principal, I started to dress. I always dressed, I guess, corny, like pretty dressy. But as a teacher, when I felt like, okay, this is my third year, I'm kind of ready. I know that this is new still, but I'm ready to be an administrator. I started wearing suits and people thought that I was. And so I just continued that. And then within 5 years, 4 years, most people don't know this, I only taught for 4 years. No, 3 years. And I was a Title I coordinator for 2 years, and then I became a principal.
Wow.
Because most people, I guess it depends on where you are, but you do need a minimum, at least at the time in the state that I was in, a minimum of 5 years experience to even be a principal. But so I just take that into entrepreneurship, that sort of mindset. And, there are a lot of times when my kids need stuff or want my attention that I'm in this office doing stuff and they check me on it. And so, you have to take the time, you have to set aside the time to be intentional about stuff. But even with that, I found a way to get creative. Like tonight is Friday and we might have family movie night or game night. Well, I have the game set up. It's the cash flow game. So we're mixing it together.
I like that.
So my kids are going to be learning about balance sheets and stuff, but it's still time for us to spend together because it's important to me that my husband and I teach them these things when they're young because, I think it's so much easier when you're young to get used to failing and bouncing back, that when you are an adult, you're not as fearful.
Exactly. What is something that, as you were rising in your career, both as a principal, but then also as an entrepreneur, what is one lesson you wish you would have known that you've now learned?
I can tell you that I wish that I had learned sooner that you don't have to have the A to Z figured out before you get started. Just start and you'll figure it out, because I'm a planner and a lot of women tend to want to be extra qualified before they apply for something or do something.
Talk to me about that perspective. Why is that?
Well, I literally took a course when I was in my master's program on women in leadership, and this is research-based. And I think it has to do with just the beginning of time. Do you know that women were not even allowed to have checking accounts in this country until like the 70s?
Really?
Yes, because they were perceived as bad with money. Oh, you need your husband to do this and that. I mean, even today, there are people in society that impose certain opinions and perspectives on people, on women, about things that are absolutely ridiculous. And so I think as women, we feel like we have something to prove. Like we want to make sure that we're totally qualified before we run or apply for a position or create a business. Sometimes we want to be a total expert in it. I mean, take Hillary Clinton. This isn't meant to be political, but she is the most qualified person to ever run for president. Most qualified, ready to go. She's got,
Hands down,
most of the boxes, even more than Barack Obama. And she didn't even win the election. There were so many women who hated on her. for odd reasons. It's the oddest thing. But I just wish that I had had that I heard this saying once that somebody was having a discussion and they wanted to do something new and they said they were scared. And the person they were talking to said, sometimes you have to do it scared. I wish I had gotten that lesson sooner. Do it anyway.
What is one thing that that you're doing scared right now, but that if it works out, when it works out, it'll shift people's lives?
Oh my God, so many things. Just taking on new business endeavors. So one thing like that, I hope I don't sound like I'm full of regrets, because I'm not. I've just reflected and learned, and entrepreneurship or die for me, okay?
I love it.
So one thing that I really wanted to do back when I was probably fresh out of college, I got a little bit involved with it and I ran scared, was real estate investing. And so I learned some things, and it's just, I didn't know anyone who was into it. I didn't have anyone who I could learn from. And I don't like to use the like any reason, like nobody in my family knew, because they didn't know. If they knew, they probably want to do it too. Like, it's not their fault. I didn't go beyond my fears enough. I think I had an opportunity when it was September 11th, 2001. Okay. I was at an entrepreneurial event and I was ready to go all in. And we had some downtime. So I went up to the speaker and I talked to him and I said, do you think this is something that people can make money from full time? Now, mind you, this guy had just gotten finished speaking. He sold us the whole thing, okay? We were in the building that he was representing. And I asked him that because I was about to cash out my little retirement. I was a first-year teacher. He said, no. And I let that get in my head for too many years. I'm like, this man is up here saying this, and he's saying, no, this isn't something that you can really do full time. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. And I let that sort of set me back, and I didn't pursue real estate. And I always wanted to, and I'm finally doing it. I have a few properties, a few plots of land, but one of the biggest endeavors that I'm going to be taking on is in real estate. It's commercial, it's some residential, but I'll have a lot more control in it. This is something that I want to do, and I am doing it.
I love that.
In real estate. So
I love that perspective of you went from this person that you went through a season or even multiple seasons of feeling down. And as you were going through, you're crushing your redevelopment, your redefining of yourself. And now for you to say that you are doing it, and this perspective of entrepreneurship or die, I absolutely love it. And I think one other thing that you're working on right now is a book.
yes.
Could you tell everybody listening what your book is about, what to expect from your book, and how you're going to leverage that book to be able to potentially even buy more plots of land?
Yeah. So this book for me is a great way for me to combine my passions. So one of the things that ironically came about when I quit my job as a principal is I quit right after I had my daughter, and then I had my second child, that's a son. And I never, ever, even as an educator, I never wanted to homeschool or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I said I won't, unless my kids need me to. And lo and behold, that is what happened. So a part of the reason I wrote this book is because of the experience that I went through with my kids in education. And so my children are what people would classify as gifted and twice exceptional. And that means that in one or more subject area, they are very above average, but they also have some learning deficits or struggles as well. And so it's a very nuanced thing. And there are a lot of parents who have kids who fit this description, but there's not a lot of guidance, not a lot of support in that area. It's like it's emerging. And in the regular school system, it's just the regular school system is just not a good fit for them. And the main reason why is because their needs are not just cut and dry. So your kid could be in the 3rd grade, but they might need to skip a grade in one or more subject areas, but maybe not all. But the problem comes in if they don't get those needs met just the right way, they can regress as they get older. In high school, a lot of these kids drop out. Some of them end up incarcerated because, they get bored, they don't have things to do, they're young and they have all this ability to do certain things, but they're still kids and they didn't have the right guidance. So the point of my book is to help parents who have kids who are advanced in a certain area to help meet their needs. Research shows that 60% of kids who skip a grade, who need to skip a grade, do so much better in life than if they don't. And so I'm just providing parents with education and information that will help them to understand their child. It will help them to understand how to facilitate their learning process, because you need a team for them as they're growing up, right? You're going to be intentional about their education. And then once they graduate, what do you do then? If you've been intentional about their education, when when they're supposed to be off in the world, don't you want them to have the same kind of experience where they get to have their needs met and they're positioned properly to live their best life? Because they do have some extraordinary needs, like some things that the average person won't need. And so what I talk about is how to help your kid to launch in life, how to help them to live their best life. And that is through entrepreneurship. What better way than to let them still pursue their talents, their interests, and monetize that? Because a lot of these kids find it young and they can do some really crazy things. Like I don't know if you know anything about Bill Gates, but when he was a teenager, he had an extraordinary opportunity because of the family that he grew up in and the access that they had. He had access to something that he loved to learn about that probably 1% of teenagers had at the time, and that was a computer. He had an actual computer that he got to play with day in and day out. I say play with, I mean play around with. It was not a toy, it was sophisticated. Yeah. But look at what he did with that interest. And so I just talk about how you can position your child. And a lot of these people do have some deficits as well. But again, they had the right environment for success. And so I just want to help the average parent to be able to help set their child up for success in their adult life. And that is, in my opinion, through entrepreneurship.
What is one strategy, any parent that is listening right now that potentially has a child or knows of someone that has a child similar to yours or similar to the parents that you'll be helping them in this book? What's one strategy that you would recommend that they could use potentially right now or implement within their household or within the classroom that would potentially move that student forward?
One thing I would say is if you've noticed that your child is taking an interest in something, even if you think it might be a little destructive, let them pursue it. Just get out of their way, give them what they need and let them do it. For example, I used to find chemicals and things in ice trays in my freezer that I know I didn't put there, concoctions that were made, because I had a little chemist in my family. And so by letting her pursue that, she is so great at making things. Last week, I'm complaining again because I see something that looks like color, not like kind of like food coloring, and my sugar and stuff and she's got this container where she's made this sugar scrub moisturizing cream, and she's 12 now. But she had it in a jar already, and I tried it out. It smelled good. It felt good. I'm like, okay, we might be able to do something with this. You keep, you keep going with that. And so just give them the opportunity without judgment as much as possible, because I know it can be frustrating when they make messes, but let them make a mess. Give them a space in the house that you agree to let them create. They do not get enough time to create in a traditional school setting. So that would be number one. Just let them have time to think and create.
I love that. Juaneka, that is good. I even think about that for my son, and I was just thinking about it. There's so many, like he's a builder and he's an artist, I believe. Like he's always drawing something. He's literally turned like construction paper into envelopes, and he writes on paper planes and puts it in the envelope and then drops it into the house in different places.
I love it.
The other day he used like paper and canvases, and he cut open the canvas, and he used the canvas as a shield, built himself a crown, and then made a sword and was walking around the house. I'm like, we spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on actual swords and planes and all these different things, but he loves to create and color and that artistic and creative side. So for you to even say, just let them have a creative space, I'm thinking about a room in here and moving some things around and literally just let it being his playroom, essentially.
Yes, get him a maker space, create a maker space. So he can just go to town, do whatever he wants, and you would be amazed at what they can do. Like one thing that led me to that philosophy is when my kids they're still little, but they're older now. But when they were like toddlers and first started to go to school, when they were in kindergarten and like second grade, my kids were like this. If as a teacher, you give them a coloring sheet, it may not look so great, but if you give them a blank piece of paper, they're going to create a masterpiece. I kid you not. It's so cool to watch that, even aside from the fact that they're my kids, just as individuals, just to see them create things. And I want that for them. And I want that for all children, to be able to find that genius, whatever it is within, and focus on that. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we get caught up in things that we can't do well, but I am an advocate for letting people focus on their zone of genius. And that's where that mindset comes from. I've just seen it. You boost their confidence, you boost their creativity when you give them those options, those opportunities to create, even when they're little. It'll just be that much easier once they're an adult.
That's so powerful. Finding your genius, creating your zone of genius, creating a space to be creative, digging in, not giving up, believing in yourself. All of these different things are so critical in this conversation. I just really appreciate your time. If you had 60 seconds to speak to your audience, that specific, like every single person that is your target audience, if you had 60 seconds to motivate them or inspire them or to say something to them that will at least get them one step closer to their goal, what would you say?
That's a lot of pressure. What I would say to people is that you need to go somewhere and take the time to think. And I want you to think about exactly what it is that you want, and I want you to write it down. And I want you to pick it apart step by step and create your own little thinking map, roadmap about how you can get there. Just do one thing at a time until you get to that goal. Because there's no problem, I think, that you cannot solve. And I think that we are very easily, we have our ability to critically think snuffed out. It's a buzzword, but we don't take enough time to actually critically think. And we can solve our own problems, contrary to what you may have believed in the past since you were little about getting a right answer. When it comes to life, ultimately, there are not just right answers. There are multiple answers. There are alternative answers. There's another way to get to an answer. And I just encourage anybody who wants something that they think they cannot have, just sit down and think about how you can get it. It's not, I can't do this. It's how can I do this? And who can help me? You have to be willing to ask for that help too, I think.
That's powerful. There's no better way to finish up tonight or today. Where can we find you, Juaneka?
So you can find me on Instagram at 180 Education. That's 180 spelled out and just exactly how it is. The number was taken, so I had to write it. And I also have a website, 180education.com as well. And you can find me in those two places.
This is the Writers Game podcast where we help you monetize your message and magnify your voice. I'm here with the one and only Juaneka Brim. I'm so excited and thankful and truly grateful that you were gracious enough to give us your presence and share so many amazing gems. If you're listening to the podcast, like, subscribe, and share, and go follow Juaneka on her journey to continuing to shift the educational industry, but also change our world. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next episode.